Hello, a super programme for you this evening with the first of a two-part look at the island's native carnivorous plants. Yes, some of you didn't even know we had any, did you? And another first in an occasional series which I hope to run over coming, series of Man in the Wild, looking at different habitats around the Isle of Man and how groups are being set up to help conserve them. No time to say more, wellies on, let's get out there. Yeah, you can hear. Moved on to slightly squelchier territory here. And if you listen carefully, you can hopefully hear some bird life in the background there. And we've come out, well, uplands, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. Some of the Isle of Man's absolute gems, of course, particularly at this time of the year. Harsh territory in the winter, as we know well this year. Glorious day today for once, pretty unusual for Man in the Wild. We normally come out in the howling wind and rain and get absolutely soaked, but glad to say I've come out with a, I was going to say a hardy group, but they're actually all in shirts today, so it's, you know, it's one of the benefits of the job, I guess. And first off, just with Dr. Peter McAvoy, well, perhaps first off, we're in what, the Sulby catchment area around here?
We are, yes. We're right in the middle of the island, if you like, in what we call the Central Hills. Sulby Reservoir is just below us, and every direction you look, you can see hilltops covered in heather. And you're out, well, a little group of us out here today. We've got Sean Gelling behind us here, works on the uplands, also Anne-Marie McDevitt from Manx BirdLife. And so today, like I said, a glorious day, fantastic day to be out for once, such a joy to be here. And this is what, surveying habitat around here, what, with a mind to birds in the first instance, or what are we talking about here? Yes, I think we're looking at the condition of the heathland in general. It's a very important habitat for birds. I think what people forget is when they're in a habitat like this, they look around them, there's heather as far as the eye can see, and it's, you know, it's wet, it's horrible, it's wasteland, it's not usually sunny like this. But this is actually a very rare habitat in a global context. It's really only common in the west of Europe. And what we're standing on is thousands of years worth of accumulated dead plants, essentially. And this is actually coming down, it's fairly dry underfoot, just where we are now, as we've been hearing. It's pretty marshy. I don't think we're going to sink, but it's certainly looking at it before, and I'll have a word with Sean in a minute, but he was probing it, and the probe just seemed to disappear, so there's a fair depth in this. There could be anything from 1 to 4 or 5 metres, and it's principally made up of this stuff here, which is sphagnum moss. That's okay. Yep. That's the classic bog moss. And I say, you know, I'm holding it in my hand. There's more water in here, they say, than equivalent in milk. So if you wring that out, that, amazing! It comes down like a sponge. Yeah. I mean, it's just. Yeah, as I say, we're in a water catchment, so there's water in this that's been held here for weeks and months. It's slowly trickling its way into the Sulby, so it ensures a nice continuous supply of clean water into the reservoir all year. So this is why you see, if you go down to some of the glens, I suppose you see some of the waterfalls and never seem to dry up. Exactly. It's always coming out of this. This is the sponge where it starts its journey. So it's a vital area in many ways. When it comes to, I suppose, management, clearly these areas are great. Is this really quite a complex balancing act then? It is. I mean, the three great things that this hill produces are food. So you've got sheep on here. We've just seen the water storage potential of it. But this sphagnum also stores carbon. It locks up atmospheric CO2. And that needs a healthy wet bog that's not overgrazed, it's not drained too much, and it is a balancing act. But on places we sit here now, it's fulfilling all three of those things really well. So this is something really, and again you talk about carbon, we hear this a lot in the news now, and hardly a week goes by where we don't hear some sort of element of sort of carbon management, I guess. Is this a sort of shift in the way we manage these sort of upland habitats? I think it's a kind of top-down approach rather than looking at all the different aspects. If we can ensure that the bog is intact, in that it's a healthy ecosystem and it's sequestering or storing more carbon, then all the other things are looking after themselves. More on the uplands in a minute or two, but before that I took my life in my hands, more literally than I might have thought when I saw where we were treading, and ventured forth to the Sulby Claddock to look at 2 species of carnivorous plants on the island, including one which has only recently been rediscovered after years of thought that it might be extinct here.
Right, here we are. Are we in luck?
Okay, Howard, so we're looking for carnivorous plants, and this part of the Balaf Curragh has got both the very most common carnivorous plant on the island and the very rarest. So we'll show you the very most common, which I'm sure you're very familiar with first, and it's the round-leaved sundew.
Ah, and here it is down here.
There you go.
Fantastic.
You can see this one's curled around something. I bet there's a little insect in there. Yeah, sure enough. There's something. I can't tell what it is because it's totally enveloped by the leaf of the sundew. And you can see the sundew here. It's just coming into flower. Very nondescript flowers. And it's growing in a very good quality bit of bogland. You know it's good quality because you've got this lovely and very aptly named sedge here. Which just grows in very good quality habitat. It's called the flea sedge. And if you can see it, it just sort of has these, well, when it's a bit riper, the seed heads actually ping off just like a flea, and they go as black as a flea, and they're most perfectly named little plant. And they only tend to grow in these really good quality bogland habitats. But this is very different bog to about 10 metres to our west, which, if I can do this, there's a little bit of bounce, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And beneath us, there's about 2 or 3 metres of fairly consolidated peat, quite solid peat. The same will not be true a few metres over to our west over there, because it's going to get quite boggy.
Everyone thinks of the Venus flytrap, of course, you see in the garden centres, and I'm sure a few of you have got them on the windowsill. 4 documented on the island?
5 actually documented on the island, but 1 extinct, almost certainly extinct, and was never found as a live specimen on the island. It was only incidentally found as a museum specimen almost a century after it was after it was first mounted. So we know it existed on the island, but we have no idea where it occurred. Almost certainly the Balaf Curraghs or the roundabouts, and that was the lesser bladderwort. And it's a plant that would be called quite rare across the British Isles generally, quite uncommon. The other ones, the round-leaved sundew, pretty much all across the uplands and heathlands of the British Isles, fairly widespread, fairly common. It's often overlooked because it is quite small and quite inconspicuous unless you really got your nose to the ground.
Yeah, beautiful when you get down there, I think. Real like little crown with the sort of little hairs and the colour.
A lovely purplish reddish colour, really nice. Yeah, I really enjoy seeing it, not just because I know it's interesting, but I know where it occurs, that I'm bound to find lots of other interesting species of plant and animal. It, like all the carnivorous plants, and generally carnivorous plants across the world, be it pitcher plants or Venus flytraps or the British native ones, they all grow in wet, acid, boggy ground with very, very low fertility. And that's why they're carnivorous.
Yeah, supplementing their diet.
They don't actually take the starch and the protein out of the animal. They just take the nutrients, the minerals and the nitrogen, the things that they can't get out of the soil, because it's all locked up in a few thousand years worth of peat underneath our soil. So it's just not available for them to find in the soil. Hence why they're looking for it elsewhere to give them that little competitive edge.
But it never ceases to amaze me, though. I don't know how many thousands of years it's taken for them to evolve this particular behavioural pattern, but the very fact that a plant can evolve over these eons, or however long it's taken, and sort of come along to the case of, well, when the habitat aren't surviving, not enough nutrients, I know, we'll actually catch another living organism and absorb what we need from that. Incredible.
It is incredible, and there's a lot of convergent evolution on there, because there's a lot of plants that are completely unrelated to each other that have become carnivorous. So it's clearly a very successful adaptation. So a pitcher plant is not really particularly related to a bladderwort or a butterwort. Butterworts and sundews are very vaguely related, but it seems to be a very useful tactic. Probably wouldn't want to come out to this sort of part of the Curragh, because as soon as you get off the footpath you are in danger of falling foul of the bog and getting trapped.
Exactly,
so
yes.
I think
probably
it's
not a wise move anyway.
It's best to go quite wary out of the bird breeding season and go with people.
Lovely. Right. we'll move on a bit and see what we can find. This other area. There we go.
Okay, Howard, so we're right on the point here between very hard consolidated peat, which is, okay, it's a bit soft, it's a bit boggy, and really boggy peat, and you can see it's actually a very straight line running right across here.
There is, you can see it, yeah,
Yep.
There's sort of delineated, isn't there?
And it is because it's a man-made feature. This is an old peat cutting pool. Would have been a very large peat cutting operation here. In fact, I think it goes on for a couple of acres around here. And as soon as you tread on it, you'll find out it's a different beast altogether. Somewhat more
Yes.
nervous about this one. So this is really a quaking bog here. If I jump up and down,
The whole thing
the whole thing just
shakes
quakes for
like a
metres
jelly.
around.
It's incredible, isn't it? It is incredible. Although, as you say, there's sort of always that feeling that
Yes. Whereas if you fall through the bog mat there, you'll not go very far. If you fall through the bog mat here, it's just slurry underneath, and you would just sink to the bottom, probably about 2 or 3 metres down. And you'd be preserved as an archaeological specimen for a few centuries.
well, that's
to come, which would be
at
nice.
least to know your demise wouldn't be completely wasted then.
No.
Although, of course, Andre has the great advantage of being somewhat taller than me, so he'd probably survive.
A few seconds longer. But fortunately, the root mat here is very thick, so the chances of actually falling through it are quite slim. But it's certainly something I wouldn't advise people go in a place like this by themselves.
Wandering around, no, not the place to go out.
A lovely rare plant here, I say lovely, it's lovely for a botanist, is lesser tussock sedge. Now this is very rare on the island. You don't find it in many places at all. And then you've got bog St John's wort, which is this hairy little plant down here. See it just here?
Ah, got him, yes.
Yeah. So a few of the species that we were finding earlier are still here. The bog bean is still here, the carnation sedge is still here, but there's a whole lot of different plants here as well. This is a much more fragile habitat. It's quite ephemeral, so leave it for longer and longer, and the more the peat will consolidate and harden, and some of these rarer plants will gradually, over the course of hundreds of years, disappear. And that is if willow and birch trees don't come in and just turn this whole lot into woodland, which is always a risk. And now let's see if we can find ourselves some bladderwort.
Ah, okay.
So this is a typical pool for it.
We just have a rummage down.
Here we go. I think I've found a bit of bladderwort.
Wow.
Now they're totally rootless.
Gosh, now look at this.
Because it doesn't require getting nutrients out of the ground, so it has no roots at all. It just free floats, and you can see straight away it's covered in these little bladders or sacs.
Wow, so this is something Andre's picked out. It can't be more than 3 inches maximum long. It's sort of sludgy brown colour, so you wouldn't call it beautiful to look at. It's almost like a seaweed, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
sort
the
of-
brown actually just comes from algae that's growing on it. It's a much more vibrant green than it looks.
it looks dead when you pull it out like that, doesn't it? You wouldn't believe it's actually living and...
See if I can freshen it up a little bit. So look, you can see it where it's a bit fresher.
Yeah,
it is a bit greener.
okay, there's some green coming in there now.
And you can see these
and these
little
bladders
sacs.
on the end there, right. So these are like little flotation chambers, or are they?
No, these are the carnivorous bit of the
That's
plant.
the actual carnivorous bit, okay.
So they're very small, but their prey is exceptionally small, little water fleas and other invertebrates in here. And they're pressure loaded. I don't know the physics behind it, but once they sense something swimming past, they open up, suck in the bit of water plus the insect,
Little insect
hopefully,
in it.
close up again, and they then slowly digest.
Absolutely amazing.
Ah, yes, sounds like James Davis after trapping a Snickers. Now back to the uplands to hear more from another member of our little group.
Let's paddle over here, and we've got Sean Gelling, who's just over to one side, and you've got... Well, I'm saying it's a probe. This is a sort of a depth probe you can actually use just to see how deep some of these areas are.
Yeah, this is the auger that well, I carry out in the hill with me quite a lot, just out of interest really, to see which areas I've got deep peat on, because we've got a wide variety of habitats in the hills, and peat's pretty much the underlying soil on all our uplands, but it can range from 5 centimetres up to, like Peter says, several metres deep, and in different stages as well. So some of it's very historic and it's dry and it's no longer making any more peat, you know. But in places like this, it's in good conditions. Year on year, the peat's getting deeper.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing, presumably. Is that what we want?
It's fantastic in an area like this, yeah, it's brilliant. For all sorts of reasons, habitat-wise, like Peter spoke about carbon. But it's also insect-rich as well, areas like this. So we compare it to the adjacent piece of ground that's slightly drier. That might be fantastic habitat for nesting birds, but most of the upland birds that obviously all nest on the ground up here, a lot of them, they need insects the first few days, if not the first week of their existence as chicks, and they'll come to, the adult birds will lead their chicks to an area like this, and they'll be able to forage on more insects in the wetter areas, so it's very important. So we're keeping a real eye on some of these places, and we may have lost some wetter areas in the past, but we're fairly confident that's on the department up in the state that we're not going to let that happen again in the future. We work very closely with our tenants. In an area like this, we have grazing tenants, we'll also have shooting tenants. They're both after a similar thing, where they both want good habitat for the grazing livestock, also good habitat for game species. So they work hand in hand to do the management, and that relationship between the two separate parties is improving all the time, which is great all around for people with an interest in preserving the uplands. And perhaps the lesser known area of the tenants over there who are for shooting, but this actually in many ways is beneficial overall. The management of the lands for shooting purposes is actually beneficial from wildlife point of view. Yes, yeah, it's probably worth pointing out that obviously the main interest in the uplands from a shooting man's point of view would be to harvest red grouse, which we find in most of our heather-clad hills over here. But however, the numbers of red grouse have been low for maybe 20, nearly 30 years now, so there hasn't really been any grouse shooting since the early 90s, so if not before that really, but there was a self-imposed restriction put on by the tenants then. However, some of the good ones or all the good ones that we have continue to do management that's beneficial directly for grouse, but the offshot of that is it's the wider habitat improvement is good for all moorland birds and also the grazing livestock. Their management primarily revolves around the rotational birding of heather, which is the main food source for grouse. So it's but also very important for sheep, and the pipits and skylarks that we hear now. They also benefit from this burning because we get temporary bare patches of ground, which is again good for insects, good for foraging passerines like these birds that we can hear around us.
Beautiful. And we were saying just to Peter there, it is a complex balancing act in many ways, and presumably again you have to take in interest from all parties.
Yeah, we do. The current situation, it's like Peter alluded to, we're very lucky here that the hills in the Isle of Man are in far better condition than they are in some places of the UK. Things aren't ideal, but we're in a good place at the moment to work from that, and we've got a nice working group come together. It's very positive at the moment.
And finally I crossed to bird expert Anne-Marie McDevitt from Manx Birdlife and suggested to her it was a beautiful place and day for birding.
Today we've had some beautiful sightings actually of hen harrier. We haven't seen any grouse so far. It's full of upland skylarks, and we've heard some curlew as well. So
all right. Now the skylarks we were hearing just as we were coming down, I think, weren't they?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So he's singing up as high as he can in the sky there. But no, the uplands are really fantastic for those. Like I said, those are the classic upland birds are really the hen harrier and the red grouse, the things that depend on that upland heather moorland.
And we've spoken about the hen harrier before, great success story on the Isle of Man and much heralded a few years ago. And then just recently, last year or two, numbers seem to have been having some problems dipping a bit. Yeah,
they are going down a bit, and I mean that's partly why we've come out today too, is just to kind of have a look at some of the traditional sites and sites that they've been lost from, and also to do that for other species like curlew as well. So we are looking to kind of find out why that's happening, you know, what changes are being brought about that are causing the decline in hen harrier, because they have a good population on the island and we want to keep it that way.
That way as well.
Yeah.
If we were saying this is sort of multi-agency, so from your perspective or within Manx Birdlife's perspective, this is actually working sort of hand in glove hopefully with the department, with Manx Wildlife Trust, with the tenants and such like on areas such
Yeah.
as this.
Yeah, I think this idea of coming together as and having a strategy for the uplands is fantastic. And one of the big things that we talked about at the first meeting, which had all the people that you mentioned there, was that the need to kind of communicate the importance of the uplands, both in its wildlife value, but also these essential services that that Peter and Sean were talking about, the carbon, the clean water, all the things that it gives us. And I think so communication, I think, will be a big thing. But it's great, really, I think, for all the people that have a stake in the uplands now to come together and work together, because we need, for example, for the birds, obviously we need it to be farmed, we need the heather to be managed, and all these things. Otherwise, you don't have the biodiversity, the wildlife that we're seeing today.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you've been used to working over with the RSPB as well over in Northern Ireland there.
Yeah.
We heard Sean saying we're actually well provided, and we've actually got some really nice upland habitats here. How do we sort of compare to the likes of our neighbours when it comes to habitats like these for that diversity, well, particularly in this case bird life?
No, very good actually. Like I say, the hen harrier population is good here. I mean, red grouse, it's very similar at home. It's struggling a bit really. But I think there are sort of more subtle issues here. So your habitat's in pretty good condition, but we were talking there about this idea of what we call marginal land, where your heather might be really nice, but often it goes straight into very improved ground. And that kind of in-between rushy ground, the kind of ground that we're on today, is really important as well. Because sometimes, for example, a curlew might nest at the edge of a piece of heather moorland, but it might like to go into a grazed field that a farmer has, not too improved, not too much fertiliser on it, to feed its chicks. So you really need that network. So I think that's a bit of a difference here on the Isle of Man, but in terms of the heather moorland, much of it is in very good condition, I think, compared to elsewhere.
And so overall, this group you're talking about, this is really trying to come up with presumably a long-term strategy for the preservation, and on the one hand it's being used for grazing, again for shootings, we're hearing, also of course preservation for the likes of the species that actually we'll find here.
Yeah, I think you need to have that long-term vision, because there's some great things happening. You want to make sure that they continue. You want to make tweaks and change some things. And because it takes time, and these are big landscapes, you need a proper strategy that's going to be kind of far-reaching if you want to see change happening. And I think this group is a group that can do it.
Just time to join Andre again in the bog habitat of the curragh at Sulby for our bladderwort.
Sadly, this plant, it's too far north in the world here for it to flower. So it entirely spreads vegetatively, probably on the feet of waterfowl, or as happens in the Bluff Curragh quite frequently, the Bluff Curragh floods, and this being a free-floating plant, bits of it can just get carried away and possibly then deposited in new areas. So it doesn't flower, it doesn't self-seed. If you want to see one flower, really good places are the Norfolk Broads, and they have spectacular, or at least very attractive, yellow flowers. And unfortunately, you need to get it to flower to be able to identify the species. There are two very, very similar species, greater bladderwort and common bladderwort, and we would literally have no idea which one this is. So we just call it bladderwort spur. Which is just the botanist term for a bladderwort of unknown species.
And so it was known. How do we? Because I believe it had thought it had died out altogether, and as you say, that it was only really recently rediscovered by yourself just a month or two back.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we do. I do it as part of the Wildflowers of Man project, is to check up on old records of rare or believed to be extinct records of plants. And 99% of the time, well, I won't say 99% of the time, but certainly 90% of the time, I'll go out, check out the record, and it's not there anymore. Someone thought it was extinct, and it definitely is. And sometimes, just occasionally, you'll find out that everyone had kind of written it off, but actually it's still there. It just required someone with the right eyes to go and have a look. So that's great. We know it's still here. There's about 2 or 3 pools here in this little patch that it still grows in, and I would hope it would take probably another 10-15 years before the willow would grow up and really become a problem here, which gives us a window of a decade to get some conservation measures in locally to make sure that it can survive in the long term. So it's a good window of opportunity.
Stuff. More carnivorous plants next week for the last in the series. Cheerio. Hello, the super